what board and paper should be used in bookbinding and box making projects. What do you use? In this video, I'll show you my preferences and also tell you what options I don't recommend. Hi, I'm Joanna and welcome to my missredfox paper art channel. When making notebooks or a box, you'll basically need two different types of raw material. Something like board for the covers or for constructing the box, and something like paper for wrapping, so gluing on the covers or on the box, and also paper for the pages, etc. I'll explain them one by one. But before I begin, if you like bookbinding and paper crafts in general, feel free to like and subscribe. This channel is all about these subjects. Thank you so much. When we make notebooks or a box, the paper and board you choose is not only a matter of personal preference, so what you like, their appearance, but they also and mainly depend on the binding method of the book, the size, how you'd like to use the book, so for writing, sketching, painting, and what materials you can buy where you live. What I preferred and used changed over the years. I started to bind books with soft covers, then changed to hardcover books with Japanese Chiyogami paper covers, then moved to maps and good quality wrapping papers. Now I have a variety of all these papers in my studio and use them for different projects. I even used to remember where I bought a specific paper, mostly during my travels, and then I almost always have a tube or at least a long plastic bag with me to be able to transport the paper roll properly so it doesn't crease, and especially when it might rain. When I know a kind of paper because I bought it before, I ordered it online too. But for the first time, I prefer to buy it in a real brick and mortar store and see it and feel it with my hands so I know if it's suitable for bookbinding or not. It's the same with fabric, by the way. Some things are better bought offline first. Okay, so here are the materials I use in my bookbinding projects. For hardcovers, you'll need some kind of a book board. Davey board is smoother, has a better quality and high density, so warp resistance, and is my first choice when I'm doing hardcover books. Cardboard, chipboard, greyboard are not guaranteed acid-free, so this is only the second choice, because board that isn't acid-free will yellow and or break down paper fibers over time if paper is glued on it. And by the way, the yellowing process goes for not acid-free paper too. Thin board. I think it's actually used for making architecture models, but I sometimes use it as a base for the covers if my decorative paper is quite thin and or white. Here's an example of a book I made wrapped in white handmade paper, which I stamped, and the base was thin board. They all come in different sizes and thicknesses. 1.5 millimeter, 2 millimeter, 2.5, 3 millimeter, etc. Thinner is not so good. They work faster if you don't pay attention to grain, and you can find my comprehensive video on paper grain linked in the description. I find that a 2 millimeter board is okay to cut at home using something like this and a ruler to protect your fingers, and when starting out with bookbinding. Use thicker boards, so 3 millimeter for larger books or boxes, but a 3 millimeter board requires a sharper blade and eventually more cuts. I've made the experience that my print shop won't cut boards that are too thick, so more than 2 millimeter, because that blunts the blade of the paper cutting machine. In general, you should look for a good, smooth quality of board. As an alternative, you could use the backing of sketching pads, but you can't be sure if they are acid-free. I also use board for spacers, and I have them in different sizes, so I don't have to measure each time. What I don't recommend: low density, light cardboard and not smooth. I think something like this one. It's very light and it is very rough, and the spreading of the glue on them is not so good and eventually absorb the glue too fast, so they tend to warp faster. What I also don't recommend for covers is foam board. They are like a sandwich with foam between two pieces of paper. They come in different sizes and thicknesses, but as you can see, they can bend very easily, so they are definitely not suitable for making covers. If you like to make soft covers notebooks like this one with a pamphlet stitch, you will need cardstock for the covers. They come in different weights, like 200 to 270 grams per square meter, with a pattern or in one color, so you could even stamp on them. These were my very first notebooks with Japanese binding and stamps that I carved myself. They come as standalone sheets like this one, or in scrapbook paper pads. And if you're on a budget, you can even use serial packages like this one for a semi-soft cover or a semi-hard cover, but only if you cover them in dark enough decorative paper, because otherwise you'd see the print on them. But actually they are too thin for this, and I don't really recommend them, and you don't really know if they're acid-free or not. Decorative papers for notebook covers or for boxes. Chiyogami or Yuzen washi, these are my favorite to work with. And a couple of words and translations first. Chiyo in Chiyogami means 1000 generations or 1000 years or through eternity. Gami or kami is a generic word for paper. So Chiyogami means actually paper that lasts forever. Washi, you probably heard of this one, is the traditional Japanese paper, like this one. Handmade from kozo or fogampi. Kozo is mulberry plant. They usually come in large sheets of about 61 times 91 centimeters. They have vibrant colors and often golden details, like this one. Not so often copper or silver details. The designs are very intricate. The ink is lacquered base and applied by hand using screens, and they use one screen per color. The paper that they use for Chiyogami is nowadays rather machine-made, but there still are studios that make Chiyogami from handmade paper. They were used for paper dolls originally, and they are very light and very flexible and tough. They have a straight white border if the paper used is machine-made, and a deckled edge if the paper used is handmade. They're usually about 70 grams, so quite light, and I really like to work with them because they are very flexible and beautiful. Then you have the Katazome papers. Katazome means stencil dyed. They are printed using soy-based inks on handmade paper, so you'll always have a deckled edge, white or colored like here. You'll never have metallic details in Katazome papers, only the colors, and the patterns are inspired by the kimono fabrics. This is a box that I made using Katazome paper, and I find they're a little bit thinner than the Chiyogami, but very nice to work with as well. They're very flexible and beautiful paper. The next option is the Lokta paper. Lokta paper is made of the Lokta plant or Daphne from Nepal. This is a fast-growing plant, so renewable and very sustainable. They have no paper grain because the paper is handmade, and they come in sheets of about 50 times 75 centimeters. Some of them have golden details and some not, but they are all very tear resistant, so very sturdy. I've noticed that some of the darker colors bleed when you apply moisture, so glue on them, and others are better, so you'll have to try them first with your project and see what works and what not. But in general, this is a very good paper for bookbinding and box making projects. You could also use cotton paper from India. I find this is quite thick. It's much thicker than Lokta, so almost too thick for bookbinding, and that's not so good, but I still use it sometimes if I like a pattern. It's like a little bit rough, and it has a structure on it, and usually the color is colored through, so it's the back of the paper is not white. What I really love to use for my bookbinding projects, like this little book with watercolor paper inside, is wrapping paper. I take care that I only use matte paper, not too thin, so better with more weight. What you really don't want to use as wrapping paper is this one from the roll. Even if I love the pattern, it is way too thin, it's tearing very easily, and it's shiny. So I tried these before, but they don't work. So don't use this for your bookbinding project, please. Also, you should take care that the paper is acid-free if you can find out that information. This is a book where I presume that the paper that I used, or the glue, or both, were not acid-free. If you can see, it is stained here, and I can only use it as a sample to show the binding, but something is wrong with this one, so I presume it's about not acid-free paper or glue. Sometimes the wrapping paper that I buy is not in sheets, but in books like this. It's from Pepin Press, and they are larger sheets folded with different patterns. This one is these old maps, but they have different one with flowers and so on. And I find they are very good quality for bookbinding as well. Cavallini papers or posters. I think the company comes from San Francisco, and I really, really love this paper. It has a little structure, and they are usually with maps, but also with flowers or vegetables and so on. So biology posters. And I mainly use it for notebooks like this travel notebook, but also for something like this, like this clipboard. It's quite a good quality. The colors are very vibrant, and with the texture, it's a little bit more special. So I can only recommend this one for bookbinding. Italian papers like Carta Varese or Rossi are also a good option if you want to make your books with them, to cover your books with them. They are quite detailed, and they have a good matte quality, and I can recommend them as well. If you don't want to use board paper like wrapping paper or Chiyogami paper or whatever, you could give this option a try. This is handmade paper in off-white from Hahnemühle, and I used it once to make guest book for that bed and breakfast in Spain that I really loved. And I used thin board underneath it because thin board is white and this one is white too. And then I carved a stamp to look like the tiles they have in that bed and breakfast, and I stamped it. And I think it's a very different idea, and you could give it a try too. It's something nice if you make it the stamp yourself, or you buy a stamp and use it for this, and you could try to make book covers with this. Another option is to print the paper for the covers yourself. These are covers for little Japanese notebooks that I didn't finish yet, with paper that I printed myself. I found some historic maps online and I printed them and then make the covers. And what you need to have is at least 100 grams per square meter paper, so not too thin, and in a good quality. This is even a little bit structured, so it's even nicer. So yeah, you can print them yourself and see that your colors are vibrant and that the paper has good quality, and that is another option that you could try. Another idea is to use marble paper for your covers. Although I have to admit I don't really like marble paper, I just wanted to give it a try and see how it works. And so this is paper that I marbled myself, but you could also buy it. And the nice thing, if you like something like this, is that no paper looks like the other, because they are made by hand, they are colored by hand, marbled by hand, and so they are unique. And so every book and box you'll make would look different. If we are talking about handmade dyeing or handmade printing paper, you could give this one a try. This is paper that I dyed using indigo color and the shibori technique. Shibori is something they actually use for fabric in Japan. They wrap the fabric pieces and they tie them and they submerge it into an indigo fluid and then put them in the sun to dry. So I tried this on paper too, and it worked really well, I think. And I really liked the outcome, so I should give it another try, because these are my very last pieces that I have. And I could really recommend this to you, and perhaps I'll make a video about how this works if you like. Just let me know in the comments. If you need your book to last longer, like this one. This is a guest book that I made for that bed and breakfast in Spain, and the covers are laminated. So this is something that you could try to do. I can't do it myself, I don't have the machine for that, but the print shop did this for me, and you can't really see it because it's matte, but you can feel it a little. It has a soft touch, and it actually is a very thin layer of plastic that they put over my cardboard here, over my covers, and it's for protection. You could also spray varnish on them or paint it with a brush. This one I don't really like because I think it's a little bit tacky when it dries. I should try the paint on, varnish one, but I don't have it. I'm curious if you tried it and what's your experience with it. Last but not least, you can wrap your book covers, your boards in book cloth or book linen. Of course, you could also use leather or faux leather, but you could try this one if you don't want to use paper or leather. So it's actually fabric with paper backing, and this doesn't have a paper backing, and it's quite thick, and it's quite nice to use in bookbinding projects. I don't make books covered entirely in book cloth. If I use them, I only use them for the hinges, but it's a nice thing to have and use it when you need it or when you like to give it a try for your book to look different. After you've covered your board in decorative paper, you'll need something for the inside of the cover too. And these ones are called end papers. What paper should you use as your end papers? First of all, preferably something with similar or the same weight to the cover paper, so the pull on both sides of the cover is identical or similar and the covers don't warp. I must admit, I mainly use cardstock, which is about 160 grams per square meter, so much heavier than my Chiyogami paper with 70, but in my experience this works. If I glue them properly, if I choose the grain direction properly, and I press them good 1 day or 2 days, and my covers don't work like this. These papers come in a lot of colors, and I mainly buy them from Canson. The paper is called Metan, Lana, Color, Fabriano Tiziano, and Clairefontaine, all of them from Italy or France. You can also use Lokta and Chiyogami paper, as I showed you before, or marble paper, but also handmade paper like this one from Hahnemühle. This is not white, but grayish, and it would work as well very nice on the inside of the covers, and it's even lighter than the cardstock. I think it's 100 grams. Anyway, I like to choose a color which goes with a decorative paper or contrasts it. This is an example of a fabric covered notebook. I showed it to you in a previous video, which I can link below. And it has fabric on the front side, but still paper on the inside. It's Canson Metant in red, and it contrasts this fabric, but it goes with the thread color that I used. After you've finished your covers, you want to fill your book with something, so use pages. And I will start with the thing that I don't recommend, and this is printing paper. It is too thin to write on, it's specially made for printing, but if you want to use it, try at least 90 or 100 gram paper and test it before with the pen that you want to use. But if you want to use white paper in your notebooks, use something that is thicker and very smooth, so to be able to write on them, even with a fountain pen, for example. I use 120, 90 and 160 gram paper from Color Copy, especially when I'm doing larger books that could be used as a picture album. I use the 100 grams paper for that, so for the pages to be able to hold the weight of the photos. For my traveling notebooks or for my gardening journals, I use dotted paper for the pages. Of course, I could also use lined or squared paper, but I really like this because it's quite subtle, the pattern, but you still have your lines to write straight on them, and you can also use it as a bullet journal. In the middle of the book, here and here as well, I have some colored pages made of the cardstock that I also use as end paper, and you could use them to put pictures on it or some tickets or memories that you've gathered on your travels. What I also really love to use as pages is handmade paper. Off-white or colored, these are all from Hahnemühle with 100 grams per square meter and all acid-free, even the black one. You can write on them or draw on them. I wouldn't use a fountain pen, but rather a pencil, but they are still very nice as pages. And what I like to do, I like to rip them, so I have deckled edges and not straight ones, and this gives a more organic look to the whole notebook. The next one would be art paper. I make sketchbooks and little paint books for artists, and I fill them with different paper inside. So this one, for example, is very structured, quite heavy, 450 grams watercolor paper. Here is sketching paper in beige, and this one is gray. And I buy them in either standalone sheets or in pads like this one. They come in different colors and weights and structures, and you can use them for watercolor, pastels, pencil, and other dry and wet art techniques. Last but not least, waste paper. You don't want to glue directly on your table, your cardboard and your cover papers, because your table will get dirty. So you would need something called waste paper to put underneath it. You could of course use old magazines or newspapers, but sometimes their printed color bleeds when they come in contact with moisture. So I'd rather buy a cheap ream of A3 paper like this one, glue it on one side, and then you can use the paper and rip it away, and you can use it again and again when the glue is dried. I also like to fold some papers and put my finished covers inside and put everything in the book press to dry overnight or for 1 or 2 days. Some tips to conclude. First of all, paper grain. It's a very important matter when bookbinding, and I have a video especially on this topic, which I will link in the description below. Identify the paper grain, align it properly, usually parallel to the spine, and see that your board, your cover paper, your end paper, and your pages have the same paper grain direction. Find the paper grain, do some math, and calculate the signature sizes and the cover sizes and so on. Second, invest in a good blade or cutter or trimmer or guillotine, or go to the print shop. I cut alone at home using this one, but I also go to the print shop and let them cut some boards for me or some finished book blocks. So you should see the price of the machine that you want to buy or of the cutter that you want to buy versus the time that you would invest by trimming each page or board by hand yourself with the handheld blade like this one, and decide for yourself which option is better for you. Another tip is that you can sometimes get samples from paper suppliers. So if you have this option, use it. Get a sample, use it, try to glue the paper that you got on cardboard and see how it works and so on, and then decide if you want to use this in your book project or not. As you already know, you shouldn't mix the grain of your paper for the covers and of the board, or mix the weights for cover and end paper. But sometimes I want to use the paper and don't waste it. So sometimes I turn it around and don't use it in the correct grain direction, or I use Chiyogami paper, which is only 70 grams with 160 grams end paper, and it works. So keep to the rules, but you can also bend them from time to time, and it's okay to do this. A little pro tip. Don't use the decorative paper that you have only for your notebooks or box projects. If you have any scraps, use them for little projects like this. Pencils, magnets, or bookmarks, or even envelopes. The paper is too expensive and too precious and too beautiful, especially the Chiyogami or the Lokta or the Katazome paper, to throw the bits away. So I myself keep every scrap that I have and make little things like this, and I either give them as a gift or keep them for myself or sell them. And it's a very nice and sustainable thing to do. Last but not least, how to store the paper for your bookbinding projects. Of course, you could lay it flat directly on a shelf or in a folder on a shelf, but see that that place is dry and doesn't get too much sun, because the sun could fade the colors out of your paper. Then you could build or buy a ladder for your paper. I have 4 of them. I made them myself out of wood. And first I started with 1, then I had another 2, and then a 4th one. And I put all my decorative papers on them like you see them in the store. So these are my recommendations. Let me know in the comments what papers and board do you like to use for your bookbinding and box making projects. I'm really curious to read about your preferences. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you liked this video, and if so, please like and subscribe, and I'll be back with more videos on bookbinding and paper crafting soon. If you have any questions, just write them down in the comments and I'll answer them as fast as I can. Thank you so much.